Archaeology is supposed to be about uncovering the truth, piecing together the lost fragments of human history. But what happens when the past itself is a lie? Imagine holding an ancient artifact in your hands, believing it's a priceless relic from a forgotten civilization, only to discover it was crafted in someone's backyard last Tuesday. The shocking truth: even the most brilliant historians, scientists, and collectors have fallen victim to elaborate archaeological hoaxes. Some were harmless pranks that spiraled out of control, while others were calculated deceptions designed to rewrite history itself. And today, we're diving into 30 of the most jaw-dropping examples fake so convincing they fooled the world. Think about the trust we place in experts, museums, and textbooks to tell us what's real. Now picture an entire museum exhibit filled with artifacts that never belonged to the past, or a scientific paper that sends researchers down a decades-long wild goose chase. These hoaxes didn't just mislead a few people, they reshaped our understanding of history, fueled national pride, and even sparked international controversies. From the infamous Piltdown Man, a missing link that turned out to be a Frankenstein's monster of animal bones, to the mysterious crystal skulls that captivated adventurers and filmmakers alike, these stories blur the line between fact and fiction in ways that'll leave you questioning everything. What drives someone to create a fake relic? Sometimes it's greed, other times it's fame, or even the thrill of pulling off the ultimate prank. But the most fascinating part isn't just the deception itself, it's how eagerly the world believed it. These hoaxes reveal just how much we want to uncover the impossible: lost cities, mythical treasures, proof of ancient advanced civilizations, and that longing. It makes us vulnerable, so as we unravel these 30 mind-blowing frauds, ask yourself, if even the experts can be fooled, how many other lies are still out there hiding in plain sight? Buckle up, because history is about to get a lot stranger than you ever imagined. One of the most notorious archaeological hoaxes in history began in a small English village in 1912, when amateur fossil hunter Charles Dawson made an earth-shattering claim. He discovered the missing link between apes and humans. The so-called Piltdown Man consisted of a human-like skull paired with an ape-like jaw, seemingly the perfect evolutionary bridge scientists had been searching for. Experts at the British Museum hailed it as revolutionary, and for over 40 years, textbooks touted it as proof of human origins. But the truth: the entire thing was a carefully crafted fraud. The jawbone came from an orangutan, filed down to fit the skull, while the teeth were artificially worn to mimic human wear patterns. Even the ancient staining was faked. Chemical tests later revealed it had been painted with iron and acid to appear aged. But why would someone go to such lengths? Some theories point to national pride. At the time, Britain was lagging behind Germany and France in paleontological discoveries. Piltdown Man gave the English scientific community a sudden, if fabricated, claim to fame. Others suspect Dawson himself, an ambitious amateur hungry for recognition, orchestrated the deception. The hoax unraveled in 1953 when advanced testing exposed the forgery. Fluorine dating showed the bones weren't nearly as old as claimed, and microscopic analysis revealed tool marks from modern files. The scientific community was humiliated. How had so many experts been duped for decades? Part of the answer lies in wishful thinking. Piltdown Man fit neatly into prevailing biases about human evolution, offering a convenient narrative that matched expectations. It's a stark reminder that even science isn't immune to deception when our desires cloud our judgment. And it raises an unsettling question: what other facts in the history books might be just as fabricated, waiting to be exposed? They called it the eighth wonder of the world, a 10-foot-tall stone giant, its features frozen in eternal agony, unearthed by stunned farm workers in Cardiff, New York in 1869. Newspapers screamed about a biblical Goliath found in the earth, and within days, crowds flooded the tiny town, paying 50 cents each to gawk at the so-called petrified man. But the truth behind the Cardiff Giant wasn't divine. It was downright devious. This wasn't an ancient relic. It was the brainchild of a cigar salesman named George Hull, who dreamed up the scheme after an argument about scripture. Hull had bet that he could convince people of anything, even that giants once walked the earth, just like the Bible claimed. So he secretly hired stonecutters to carve a massive figure out of gypsum, shipped it from Iowa to his cousin's farm, and buried it under cover of darkness. To make it convincing, he doused the statue in acid and hammered it with needles to mimic pores. A year later, he had the discovery staged, and the world bit hard. Scientists declared it authentic. Preachers called it proof of Genesis. Even when skeptics pointed out the giant bore an uncanny resemblance to Hull himself, the public refused to listen. The hysteria reached absurd heights. P.T. Barnum offered $60,000 for the giant, and when he was refused, he simply made a plaster copy and exhibited it as the real one. Eventually, Hull confessed, admitting the hoax, but by then, he'd already made a fortune. The Cardiff Giant became a cultural phenomenon precisely because it fed into what people wanted to believe. It wasn't just about money. It exposed how easily faith and science alike could be manipulated by a well-told story. And the punchline: today, you can still visit the giant in a small New York museum, where it's displayed not as a historical artifact, but as a monument to human gullibility. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has been venerated as one of Christianity's most sacred relics, a 14-foot linen cloth believed to bear the faint, ghostly imprint of Jesus Christ himself. Pilgrims have flocked to see it, scientists have obsessed over it, and the Catholic Church has carefully guarded it. But in 1988, a bombshell discovery shattered the myth. Carbon dating tests revealed the shroud wasn't 2,000 years old. It originated between 1260 and 1390, making it a medieval creation. Yet even today, the debate rages on. How could a mere 700-year-old artifact hold such power over the faithful? And what does its enduring mystery say about the line between belief and deception? The shroud's haunting image, a shadowy figure with wounds matching biblical accounts of crucifixion, first appeared in historical records in 1356. A French knight displayed it as the genuine burial cloth of Christ, and its uncanny details sparked immediate devotion. But skeptics have long pointed to inconsistencies. The weave matches medieval fabrics, not ancient ones. The pigment analysis suggests red ochre and tempera paints, materials common in the 14th century. Even the facial features resemble Byzantine artwork of the time, not a realistic human likeness. The most damning evidence came when 3 independent labs confirmed the carbon dating results, yet believers clung to alternate theories. Contamination, repairs, even divine interference skewing the test. What makes the Shroud of Turin so compelling isn't just the forgery itself, but the artistry behind it. Creating such a detailed, anatomically accurate image without modern tools would have required staggering skill. Some researchers propose it was made using a primitive form of photography, coating a cloth in silver nitrate and projecting light through a bas-relief carving. Others suggest it was an elaborate devotional object, never meant to deceive but to inspire, and that's the heart of the controversy. For many, the shroud transcends science. It's a tangible connection to the divine, regardless of its origin. The Catholic Church has never officially declared it authentic, yet it remains enshrined in Turin's cathedral, visited by millions. This duality, reverence despite proof, reveals something deeper about human nature. We want relics to be real, to touch the untouchable past. The Shroud of Turin stands as a testament not just to medieval craftsmanship, but to our timeless desire for proof of the miraculous. And that hunger, it's far harder to carbon date. In the late 1800s, America was obsessed with proving its antiquity, longing for a history deeper than colonial settlements and indigenous cultures. Enter the Michigan Relics, a collection of over 3,000 supposedly ancient clay tablets, pipes, and figurines covered in cryptic symbols. Discovered by a farmer named James Scotford in 1890, these artifacts appeared to depict biblical scenes in Hebrew script, suggesting lost tribes of Israel had roamed Michigan centuries before Columbus. The excitement was palpable. Scholars, clergy, and newspapers declared it proof of America's sacred past. There was just one problem. The carvings looked suspiciously fresh. The Hebrew was riddled with errors, and the ancient artifacts kept turning up wherever Scotford and his business partner, Daniel Soper, happened to be digging. The relics were laughably crude up close. Figures had comically exaggerated features, and the ancient inscriptions included modern punctuation marks. One tablet even depicted a distinctly 19th-century horse-drawn plow. Yet the hoax thrived because it fed into a powerful narrative. At a time when Americans were eager to claim a heritage rivaling Europe's, the idea of a pre-Christian Hebrew civilization on their soil was irresistible. Even when geologists pointed out the clay showed no signs of aging, believers dismissed the evidence. The relics weren't just fakes, they were a mirror held up to the era's hunger for mythic origins. Meanwhile, in Ohio, another set of dubious artifacts emerged, the Newark Holy Stones. In 1860, David Wyrick, a surveyor and amateur archaeologist, discovered a stone inscribed with Hebrew commandments in a burial mound. Soon after, he found a second stone bearing a portrait of Moses wearing a medieval-style hat. Like the Michigan relics, these objects seemed tailor-made to confirm popular theories about America's lost Israelite tribes. And like Scotford, Wyrick had a habit of finding artifacts precisely where he predicted they'd be. The stones were blatant forgeries. The Hebrew was awkwardly carved, the lettering mirrored modern fonts, and the depictions of Moses bore no resemblance to ancient art. Yet prominent figures, including a local Episcopal clergyman, championed their authenticity. Why? Because the idea of a biblical connection to America's heartland was simply too tempting to question. The hoaxes eventually collapsed under scrutiny, but not before they'd been displayed in museums and cited in sermons. Both schemes reveal the same tragicomic pattern, a mix of amateurish craftsmanship and audacious storytelling, buoyed by a public desperate to believe. These weren't just deceptions, they were cultural fantasies carved in stone, proof that when it comes to rewriting history, sometimes all it takes is a chisel and a willing audience. The Louvre prides itself on being one of the world's most discerning art institutions, a fortress of authenticity where scholars scrutinize every brushstroke and patina. But in 1896, a glittering relic slipped past their defenses, the tiara of Saitaphons, an ornate gold crown purportedly gifted by ancient Greek colonists to a Scythian king. Its intricate bands depicted scenes of warriors and chariots, with delicate Greek inscriptions dedicating it to a ruler named Saitaphons. Experts swooned. The museum paid 200,000 francs, a king's ransom, to acquire it. Only later would they learn the tiara's true origins, a backstreet workshop in Odessa, where a crafty goldsmith named Israel Rauchamovsky had forged it as a joke. Rauchamovsky wasn't even aiming for the Louvre. He'd crafted the tiara at the request of a local antiques dealer who wanted to prank a friend, never imagining it would end up in Paris. But the dealer had bigger plans. He aged the tiara with clever chemical treatments, then wove an elaborate backstory about its discovery in a Crimean tomb. The Louvre's curators, desperate to outbid rival museums for a Scythian treasure, overlooked glaring red flags. The inscriptions mixed archaic Greek with glaringly modern phrasing. The scenes borrowed heavily from known artifacts, like a cut-and-paste job of ancient motifs. But the tiara's sheer beauty blinded them. Rauchamovsky was a master metalsmith, and his craftsmanship rivaled anything from antiquity. The scandal erupted when Rauchamovsky himself read about the Louvre's prized acquisition in a newspaper. Stunned, he traveled to Paris and confessed, even demonstrating his techniques to prove it. Humiliated, the museum quietly moved the tiara to a basement where it gathered dust for decades. Yet the story doesn't end there. Rauchamovsky, far from being shunned, became a celebrity. His skill was so undeniable that art collectors commissioned new works from him, and today his forgeries are displayed alongside the artifacts that inspired them, not as hoaxes, but as tributes to a craftsman who fooled the world. What makes this hoax unforgettable isn't just the audacity, but the irony. The Louvre, guardian of the Mona Lisa and the Venus de Milo, was duped by a man who never intended to deceive them. And Rauchamovsky, he never set out to embarrass anyone. He was simply too good at his job. The tiara of Saint-Afon stands as a shimmering reminder that even the most revered institutions can be seduced by a well-told story and a touch of gold. But the Louvre wasn't alone in its embarrassment. Just a few decades later, another European museum would fall for an even more outrageous scam, one involving a creature straight out of myth. And this time, the forgers wouldn't stop at gold, they'd invent an entirely new species. In 1866, a miner working in California's Calaveras County made a bizarre claim. He'd found a human skull buried deep beneath layers of ancient lava, nestled among the bones of long-extinct animals. If true, this cavernous skull would rewrite history, proving humans had walked North America not thousands, but millions of years earlier than anyone believed. Scientists were electrified. The skull quickly became a flashpoint in the heated debate over human antiquity, with some experts declaring it the missing link between early humans and prehistoric eras. There was just one glaring problem. The whole thing was a practical joke gone terribly wrong. The miner, whose name was lost to history, had allegedly planted the skull as a prank on a local storekeeper known for collecting oddities. But when a prominent geologist, Josiah Whitney, got wind of the discovery, the joke spiraled beyond control. Whitney, desperate to prove his controversial theories about ancient humans in America, ignored obvious red flags. The skull showed no signs of mineral staining typical for fossils, and its condition was suspiciously pristine. Worse yet, locals whispered that the same miner had been seen buying a modern-day skull from a nearby medical college just weeks earlier. But Whitney dismissed the rumors, even publishing a paper declaring the Calaveras skull proof of tertiary man, a human ancestor from an era when, scientifically speaking, humans shouldn't have existed at all. For decades, the skull divided the scientific community. Some researchers pointed out its uncanny resemblance to modern Native American remains, while others, clinging to Whitney's authority, insisted it was genuine. The hoax thrived because it fed into a broader cultural battle. At a time when Darwin's theories were shaking the foundations of science, and American researchers were eager to prove their continent's prehistoric significance, the Calaveras skull offered a tantalizing, if fabricated, piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just a fossil, it was a symbol of pride, a chance to one-up European discoveries. The truth finally caught up in the early 20th century, when fluorine dating proved the skull couldn't be more than a few thousand years old. By then, Whitney was long dead, his reputation forever tied to one of archaeology's most embarrassing blunders. Yet the Calaveras skull's legacy lingers. It's a cautionary tale about how easily confirmation bias can override skepticism, and how even the brightest minds can be duped when they're desperate to believe. Today, the skull sits in a Harvard museum, labeled not as a prehistoric relic, but as a relic of something else entirely, the dangerous allure of a story too good to check. What's remarkable isn't just that the hoax worked, but how fiercely it was defended. Scientists staked careers on its authenticity, newspapers printed sensational headlines, and the public devoured the myth. The Calaveras skull didn't just fool people, it revealed how deeply we crave narratives that append what we think we know. And that's the thing about history. Sometimes the most revealing artifacts aren't the ones that tell us about the past, but the ones that show us who we really are. In 1936, California was gearing up to celebrate its past in grand style, the 400th anniversary of Sir Francis Drake's legendary voyage along the coast. Amid the festivities, a group of historians made a stunning announcement. They discovered Drake's long-lost plate of brass, an artifact the explorer supposedly left behind in 1579 to mark his claim to the land. The plaque bore an inscription in Elizabethan English, complete with Drake's signature, and seemed like the ultimate piece of California's colonial puzzle. Crowds marveled, newspapers splashed the news. The state had its crown jewel of history until science ripped the curtain away 4 decades later. The plate's origins were almost too perfect. It was found near Drake's presumed landing site by a local historian named Herbert Bolton, who'd been searching for it for years. The timing, just before the anniversary, felt like destiny. The text matched period language down to the flourishes of 16th century spelling, and the wear, it looked convincingly weathered by centuries of wind and salt. For 41 years, the plate toured museums, featured in textbooks and documentaries as irrefutable proof of Drake's presence. But in 1977, researchers decided to take a closer look, and the illusion shattered. Metallurgical testing revealed the brass wasn't Elizabethan at all. The zinc content pointed to a modern alloy, something impossible in Drake's era, the ancient corrosion. Artificially applied with acid, even the font raised eyebrows while the script mimicked period style. Subtle inconsistencies betrayed a 20th century hand. The final nail came when linguists noticed the inscription cribbed phrases verbatim from a 1934 textbook about Drake, as if the forger had copied his homework in a hurry. Who crafted the hoax remains a mystery. Some suspect Bolton's own colleagues, eager to gift him a career-defining discovery. Others point to pranksters within the Historical Society, aiming to spice up the anniversary celebrations. Whatever the motive, the Drake's plate fiasco exposes a universal truth. Even the most meticulous forgeries can't outrun technology. What once passed as authentic under the naked eye crumbles under a microscope. Yet the plate's legacy lingers not as a relic of exploration, but as a testament to how easily history can be rewritten, if only for a little while, by those who know what we want to find. And if a brass plaque could fool an entire state, imagine what else might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment or the right test to reveal its lies. In 2001, Pakistani authorities raided a dealer's home and made a grisly discovery, what appeared to be an ancient Egyptian mummy, complete with a golden crown and intricate carvings, tucked unceremoniously into a wooden crate. But this wasn't just any relic. The seller claimed it was a Persian princess, murdered 2,600 years ago, and he'd smuggled it out of Iran for a cool $6 million. Museums and collectors salivated, that is, until forensic experts took a closer look. The mummy's elaborate wrappings hid a horrifying truth. X-rays revealed modern dental work, and CT scans showed fractures inconsistent with natural mummification. Then came the bombshell toxicology tests detected traces of modern poison in the bones. This wasn't an ancient princess, it was a contemporary murder victim dressed up like a museum piece. The skull showed signs of blunt force trauma, and the body had been stuffed with linen and asphalt to mimic the mummification process, the golden mask. A convincing replica, the hieroglyphics on the sarcophagus, gibberish, a haphazard mix of Egyptian and made-up symbols. The investigation traced the body to a missing woman from Balochistan, though her identity remains shrouded in mystery. The real horror wasn't just the crime, but the ease with which it fooled experts. The hoax preyed on the black market's hunger for priceless artifacts, no questions asked. And the most chilling detail, this wasn't a one-off. Rumors swirled of other mummies circulating in the underworld, each potentially hiding a similar gruesome secret. The Persian princess scandal exposed more than just a forgery. It revealed how greed can twist history into something monstrous, turning a modern tragedy into a commodified relic. Today, the mummy sits in a Karachi police warehouse, a macabre testament to the darkest intersection of archaeology and crime. Not a window into the past, but a mirror reflecting humanity's capacity to deceive and destroy for profit. And if a fake mummy could hide a murder, what other secrets might be lurking beneath the surface of so-called ancient treasures? The past isn't always what it seems, especially when someone's willing to kill for it. In 1924, a French teenager named Émile Fradin was plowing his family's field near the village of Glosel when his cow's hoof crashed through the earth, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, dozens of strange clay tablets covered in symbols that looked nothing like any known ancient script. The discovery sent shockwaves through Europe. Some archaeologists declared the Glosel tablets a revolutionary find, evidence of a lost Neolithic writing system predating even the Sumerians. Others dismissed them as childish doodles. But as the debate raged, another artifact across the Atlantic was causing its own uproar. The Bat Creek Stone, a small slate slab unearthed in Tennessee in 1889, etched with markings that supposedly proved ancient Hebrews had visited America centuries before Columbus. The Glosel tablets were a Rorschach test for scholars. The symbols resembled a jumble of prehistoric carvings, Phoenician letters, and outright nonsense. Supporters insisted they were genuine, pointing to the site's other artifacts, pottery, bone tools, as proof of an ancient settlement, but skeptics noticed troubling details. The clay showed no signs of aging, and the symbols included oddities like a perfectly drawn reindeer, an animal not native to France in the proposed era. Then came the damning evidence. A tablet accidentally broken during analysis revealed fresh, unfired clay inside. By the 1930s, most experts agreed the tablets were modern fakes, likely crafted by Fradin himself, though he denied it to his death. The hoax thrived because it tapped into a cultural craving, the romantic idea of an unschooled farm boy stumbling upon a civilization's forgotten language. Meanwhile, the Bat Creek Stone's journey from curiosity to controversy was just as tangled. Discovered in a Native American burial mound, the stone's inscription was initially ignored until a journalist in the 1970s claimed it matched ancient Hebrew, specifically translating to for Judea. Suddenly, the stone became proof of the Mormon belief in pre-Columbian Israelite presence in America, but linguistic experts quickly dismantled the theory. The Hebrew was backwards, as if someone had copied it from a poorly understood source. The script style matched no known ancient alphabet, and the stone's provenance was dubious at best. Forensic analysis later revealed tool marks consistent with 19th century engraving, not ancient craftsmanship. What ties these two hoaxes together isn't just their disputed scripts, it's the desperation to believe in them. The Glosel tablets offered Europe a chance to rewrite the origins of writing, while the Bat Creek Stone fueled American myths of biblical connections. Both hoaxes were laughably crude upon closer inspection, yet both captivated the public because they promised to fill gaps in national narratives. They weren't just forgeries, they were mirrors reflecting what cultures wished their histories contained. And the most telling detail, in both cases the loudest defenders weren't archaeologists, they were amateur enthusiasts, journalists, and religious groups, people invested not in truth but in the story the artifacts told. Today, the Bat Creek Stone sits in the Smithsonian, labeled as a probable 19th century creation, while the Glosel tablets linger in obscurity. But their legacy endures as a warning. When it comes to the past, we don't just dig up history, we bury our fantasies in the dirt, hoping someone will mistake them for truth. And sometimes they do. In 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing trees on his Minnesota property when his axe struck something hard. A 200-pound slab of greywacke stone, its face covered in mysterious carvings. The markings were runes, an ancient Norse script, and the inscription told a jaw-dropping tale. a group of Viking explorers had supposedly ventured deep into North America in the year 1362, leaving this stone as a record of their journey. The so-called Kensington runestone became an overnight sensation, touted as proof that Vikings had reached the American Midwest centuries before Columbus. But almost immediately, the cracks in the story began to show. The runestone's text was riddled with red flags. Linguists noted the runes mixed medieval Scandinavian symbols with modern Swedish dialect, like a bizarre time-traveling mishmash. The phrase "from Vinland," a reference to the known Viking settlements in Newfoundland, was spelled in a way no Norse explorer would have used. Even the grammar was off. The inscription included the word dedication, a concept alien to 14th century Norse culture. Then there was the stone itself. Unlike genuine runestones weathered by centuries, Oman's discovery looked suspiciously fresh, with crisp edges that showed little erosion. Skeptics quickly pointed to Oman's background, a literate Swedish immigrant with known ties to Scandinavian folklore societies. He had both the knowledge and the motive to create such a hoax. At the time, Minnesota was flooded with Scandinavian settlers eager to carve out an identity distinct from the dominant Anglo culture. The runestone offered something priceless, a direct link to their heritage, elevating their community's place in American history. Tourism boomed in Kensington, with Oman charging visitors to see the artifact. Yet the debate refused to die. Even after the Smithsonian dismissed the stone as a fake in 1910, local pride kept the legend alive. Modern tests have only deepened the mystery. Some geologists argue the weathering patterns could be authentic, while others insist the carvings show tool marks from 19th century chisels. The runestone's defenders, often Scandinavian-American groups, argue that academic bias dismisses evidence of pre-Columbian Norse exploration outside coastal areas. What makes the Kensington runestone fascinating isn't just the forgery, but its enduring grip on the imagination. It's a relic of immigrant longing, a physical manifestation of the desire to belong, to rewrite one's place in a new land story. Today, the stone sits in a Minnesota museum, its inscription still defying easy answers. Whether hoax or history, it remains a testament to the power of a single artifact to blur the line between myth and memory. And if a farmer's chisel could carve a Viking legacy into stone, what other legends might be waiting to be uncovered or invented with nothing more than a little creativity and the right audience? Deep in the deserts of Peru, a farmer named Basilio Ushuaia made an astonishing claim in the 1960s. He discovered thousands of ancient stones buried near the town of Ica, each etched with impossible scenes. Dinosaurs roaming alongside humans, surgeons performing brain operations, telescopes pointed at distant stars. If these Ica stones were real, they'd upend everything we know about history, suggesting an advanced civilization with knowledge of creatures extinct for 65 million years. The media went wild. UFO enthusiasts hailed them as proof of alien contact, and one man, Swiss author Erich von Däniken, thrust them into the global spotlight, weaving them into his best-selling theory that ancient astronauts had visited Earth. There was just one problem. The stones weren't relics of a lost civilization. They were a cottage industry. Ushuaia initially sold the stones to tourists as curios, but when demand exploded, he admitted the truth. He'd carved them himself. Using dental tools and sandpaper, he copied designs from comic books, textbooks, and even dinosaur illustrations meant for children. The ancient ware. Achieved by baking the stones in cow dung and rubbing them with shoe polish. Yet despite the confession, the hoax took on a life of its own. Why? Because von Däniken refused to let facts get in the way of a good story. In his book Chariots of the Gods, he framed the stones as evidence of prehistoric alien intervention, ignoring Ushuaia's admission and insisting the farmer was forced to recant by authorities hiding the truth. The stones were riddled with absurdities upon closer inspection. The dinosaurs resembled outdated 19th century reconstructions, complete with tail-dragging posture long disproven by science. The advanced technology included blatant modern elements, like a figure using what was clearly a 20th century microscope. Even the stone's geological context was dubious. They were found loose in riverbeds, never in dated archaeological layers. But von Däniken's fans didn't care. The Ica stones became a cornerstone of the ancient astronaut mythos, their flaws dismissed as part of a cover-up. What makes this hoax remarkable isn't just the audacity of the carvings, but the psychology behind their persistence. Ushuaia wasn't trying to rewrite history, he was just making souvenirs. It was von Däniken who transformed them into evidence, exploiting the public's fascination with the unexplained. The stones tapped into a deep-seated desire to believe that our ancestors were smarter or more connected than we give them credit for. And once that narrative took hold, no amount of debunking could shake it. Today, the Ica stones still surface in conspiracy circles, their imagery recycled in documentaries and online forums. Ushuaia, amused by the chaos he'd unleashed, later said he could have carved anything, even a dinosaur riding a bicycle, and people would have believed it. And he wasn't wrong. The stones endure not because they're convincing, but because they're a blank canvas, a Rorschach test for our hunger to find wonder in the past. Sometimes the most revealing artifacts aren't the ones that tell us about ancient civilizations, but the ones that show how easily we'll fill the gaps with our own fantasies. And if a farmer with a dental drill could ignite a global phenomenon, what does that say about the other proof we cling to when the truth feels too ordinary? The Ica stones don't just challenge history, they challenge our willingness to question the stories we want to believe. Shinichi Fujimura was known as God's Hands in Japanese archaeology, a nickname earned for his uncanny ability to unearth Paleolithic artifacts where others found nothing. For decades, his discoveries pushed back the accepted timeline of human habitation in Japan, with him claiming to find tools dating back 600,000 years. Museums displayed his finds, textbooks cited his work. The entire field celebrated him as a pioneer until the morning of November 5, 2000, when a newspaper published photos of Fujimura crouched in a dugout pit, deliberately burying stone tools with his own hands. The images were damning. Fujimura had been filmed planting artifacts at the Kamatakamori site, then discovering them during official excavations. When confronted, he broke down in tears, admitting he'd faked at least 65 findings over 2 decades. His motive, a toxic mix of professional pressure and national pride. Japan's archaeological community had long been obsessed with proving the island's deep human history, eager to match discoveries in China and elsewhere. Fujimura, once a junior researcher, found himself trapped in a cycle of expectations. Each new discovery brought acclaim, funding, and demands for even older proofs. The fraud wasn't just about fame, it was about sustaining an illusion that Japan's prehistoric narrative could compete on the global stage. The fallout was catastrophic. Over 40 sites linked to Fujimura were discredited. Universities rescinded degrees based on his work. The Japanese Archaeological Association purged its records of his contributions. But the scandal exposed deeper flaws. Colleagues admitted privately they'd suspected irregularities, tools appearing in impossibly pristine condition, clustered in odd patterns, but stayed silent, fearing career repercussions. Peer review had failed spectacularly, blinded by the allure of nationalistic achievement. What makes Fujimura's deception so poignant is how ordinary it was in execution. The ancient tools weren't sophisticated forgeries, just ordinary stones he'd buried like seeds, waiting to harvest them as proof. No chemical aging, no elaborate carving. The real artifice was in the storytelling, the way each find was framed as a breakthrough. His downfall didn't just discredit artifacts, it shattered the myth of infallible expertise, revealing how easily confirmation bias can masquerade as scholarship when the stakes and egos are high enough. Today, Japan's Paleolithic research remains shadowed by the scandal. New safeguards were implemented, including mandatory third-party verification for major finds. But the Fujimura affair lingers as a cautionary tale, not just about one man's lies, but about the dangers of tying scientific legitimacy to nationalist ambition. Sometimes the most revealing artifacts aren't the ones we dig up, but the uncomfortable truths we bury along the way. In 1836, a physician named Constantin Rafinesque made an explosive claim. He'd uncovered an ancient Lenape manuscript detailing the indigenous people's creation myths and migration to North America. He called it the Walam Alam, or painted sticks, claiming it was a sacred record passed down through generations, etched onto wood and later transcribed. To settlers hungry for legitimacy, it was a goldmine proof that Native Americans themselves believed their ancestors had crossed a land bridge from Asia, reinforcing European theories about the continent's empty pre-colonial history. But the truth, the Walam Alam was a Frankenstein's monster of borrowed folklore and outright invention, stitched together to serve a very modern agenda. Rafinesque's manuscript was riddled with red flags from the start. The ancient text mixed genuine Lenape words with nonsensical syllables like a clumsy parody of indigenous language. The creation story bore suspicious resemblance to biblical Genesis, complete with flood narratives and a singular creator concepts foreign to traditional Lenape spirituality. Even the migration tale mirrored settler propaganda, depicting the Lenape as newcomers who displaced earlier, savage tribes, conveniently echoing justifications for colonial land grabs. Yet for decades, scholars treated it as authentic, citing it in textbooks and museums. Why? Because it fit a narrative that white America craved, a version of native history that made their displacement seem inevitable, even divinely ordained. The hoax unraveled in the 20th century when linguists dissected the text. The alleged Lenape words were a jumble of dialects from unrelated tribes, some misspelled or misused. The grammar didn't match any known indigenous language structure. Most damningly, no Lenape oral traditions or elders recognized the Walam Alam. Their actual creation stories, passed down for centuries, bore no resemblance to Rafinesque's invention. Anthropologists concluded the manuscript was likely cobbled together from snippets of real folklore, scrambled beyond recognition, and padded with Rafinesque's own imagination. What makes the Walam Alam uniquely insidious isn't just the forgery, but its legacy. Unlike the Cardiff Giant or Piltdown Man, this wasn't a prank or a bid for fame. It was colonialism in literary form, a fabricated history designed to overwrite indigenous truth. Even after being debunked, the manuscript lingered in academic circles, its myths seeping into pop culture and policy debates. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous hoaxes aren't the ones that trick us for a season, but the ones that shape how we see the past and, by extension, the present. Today, the Walam Alam stands as a cautionary tale about who gets to write history and why. Rafinesque, a man with no ties to the Lenape, claimed to speak for them, twisting their heritage into a tool for their own erasure. And the cruelest irony, the real Lenape creation stories, rich, nuanced, and deeply rooted in their land, were right there all along, waiting to be heard. They just didn't tell the story settlers wanted to believe. In the shadowy world of archaeological hoaxes, few artifacts have captured the imagination like the crystal skulls, translucent carvings of human craniums, allegedly crafted by ancient Mesoamerican civilizations with tools no modern expert can replicate. 13 of these eerie relics surfaced in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, most famously the Mitchell Hedges skull, claimed to be a Maya masterpiece. Its perfect symmetry, flawless quartz construction, and eerie glow-fueled wild theories, lost technologies, alien craftsmanship, even supernatural powers. But science would reveal a far less mystical truth. The skull's supposed origins crumbled under scrutiny. Microscopic analysis showed markings from high-speed rotary tools, impossible before the industrial era. The quartz traced to Brazilian mines, not Central American sources. Even the uncanny precision wasn't so mysterious. Modern gem carvers demonstrated how skilled artisans could achieve similar results with 19th century lapidary equipment. The hoax thrived because it played into romantic stereotypes about mystical indigenous cultures, while ignoring the real sophistication of actual Mesoamerican art. The skulls were likely crafted in Germany or France, sold to collectors hungry for exotic curios. Meanwhile, in 1944, Mexico, a German immigrant named Waldemar Julsrud made a claim that made the crystal skulls seem tame. Digging near Acambaro, he unearthed over 30,000 clay figurines depicting humans coexisting with dinosaurs, tyrannosaurs, stegosauruses, even pterodactyls. The Acambaro figures became a sensation among creationists, who saw them as proof that humans and dinosaurs had lived together, contradicting millions of years of evolutionary science. But the figurines were so blatantly modern they bordered on satire. The dinosaurs mirrored mid-century pop culture, not paleontology, resembling cartoonish museum displays rather than scientifically accurate reconstructions. Clay showed no signs of aging, and locals admitted Julsrud paid them to produce the pieces, churning them out by the dozen. Yet, like the crystal skulls, the figures found believers because they fed a narrative. For creationists, they disproved evolution. For conspiracy theorists, they hinted at suppressed knowledge. The truth, a clever scheme exploiting both commerce and ideology, where the real artifact wasn't the clay, it was the willingness to believe. What links these hoaxes isn't just their deception, but their durability. Despite debunking, crystal skulls still star in movies and museum exhibits, while Acambaro figures resurface in online conspiracy circles. They remind us that the most persistent fakes aren't the ones that look authentic, they're the ones that tell stories we ache to believe. Whether it's ancient astronauts or biblical literalists, these artifacts endure not as history, but as mirrors reflecting our own obsessions back at us, polished to a deceptive shine. In 1957, a bombshell dropped in the world of cartography. A mysterious parchment known as the Vinland map surfaced, claiming to depict Norse settlements in North America centuries before Columbus. The map showed Europe, Africa, and most astonishingly, a landmass labeled Vinland, matching descriptions from Viking sagas about their voyages to Newfoundland. If genuine, it would be the earliest known depiction of the Americas, rewriting history. Museums clamored to display it, scholars hailed it as a masterpiece. But beneath the faded ink and crumbling edges lay a deception so intricate, even experts were fooled for decades. The first red flag came from the ink. Chemical analysis revealed traces of anatase, a titanium dioxide compound that wasn't used in medieval pigments. The brownish-yellow hue, meant to mimic iron gall ink, was suspiciously modern. Then researchers noticed something even more damning: the map's wormholes. They matched those in a 15th century book called the Speculum Historiale, suggesting the parchment had been torn from its binding. But the holes lined up too perfectly, as if someone had carefully traced them to create the illusion of age. The trail led to a shadowy figure, Enzo Ferrajoli, an antique dealer with ties to a notorious forgery ring operating in Spain and Italy. Ferrajoli had a history of discovering rare manuscripts, and the Vinland map fit his modus operandi, an expertly aged fake, tailored to exploit the world's hunger for pre-Columbian history. The deception was almost flawless. The map borrowed place names from genuine medieval sources, blending truth with fiction so seamlessly that even seasoned historians were duped. What makes the Vinland map so fascinating isn't just the forgery, but the motives behind it. The 1950s and 60s were a golden age for Viking romanticism, with Scandinavian Americans eager to claim a foothold in the New World's narrative. The map offered tangible proof of their ancestral legacy, a validation of their cultural pride. And Yale University, which acquired the map in the 60s, had its own prestige at stake. owning the first map of America was a coup no institution wanted to debunk too quickly. By the 2000s, advanced imaging technology left no doubt. The ink was 20th century, the parchment artificially distressed. Yet the Vinland map's defenders still cling to hope. Some argue contamination could explain the annotace, or that medieval scribes might have stumbled upon titanium by chance. But the evidence is overwhelming. This wasn't a medieval relic, it was a mid-century cairn, a love letter to Viking mythology crafted with painstaking precision. The map's legacy endures not as a historical artifact, but as a cautionary tale about how easily nationalism and nostalgia can cloud our judgment. We want to believe in daring explorers and forgotten voyages, and sometimes that desire is all a forger needs to rewrite reality. Today, the Vinland map sits in Yale's Banach Library, labeled as a probable fake, but its true value lies in the questions it forces us to ask. How many other lost treasures are just reflections of what we wish the past had been? And when the next miraculous discovery emerges, will we be any better at spotting the lies? In 2005, the quiet Bosnian town of Visoko became the center of a global frenzy when self-proclaimed archaeologist Semir Osmanagic made an outrageous claim. Beneath the surrounding hills lay the largest pyramids on Earth, dwarfing even Egypt's Great Pyramid. He dubbed them the Bosnian Pyramids, insisting they were built by an unknown ancient civilization 12,000 years ago. The media erupted, tourists flooded in. But as geologists and real archaeologists arrived, they found not proof of a lost world, but a masterclass in how pseudoscience can rewrite reality for profit. The so-called pyramids were nothing more than natural geological formations, the perfectly aligned slopes, erosion from ancient rivers, the man-made tunnels. Common karst cave systems found throughout the region. Even the ancient concrete blocks Osmanagic cited were just sedimentary rock, fractured by tectonic activity. Scientists from across Europe published scathing rebuttals, pointing out the absurdity. Pyramids don't randomly appear in Bosnia, a region with zero historical or archaeological ties to such structures. Yet Osmanagic doubled down, cherry-picking data and dismissing experts as closed-minded. What fueled the hoax wasn't just bad science, it was money. Osmanagic, a businessman with no formal archaeology degree, turned the site into a cash cow. Entry fees for pyramid tours skyrocketed. He sold books, gave paid lectures, and even launched a themed park. Locals, initially skeptical, embraced the myth as tourism revitalized the struggling town. The government, seduced by potential revenue, declared the site a national heritage attraction despite overwhelming scientific consensus it was a fraud. The Bosnian pyramids reveal a darker truth about modern pseudo-archaeology. It thrives on the gaps between expertise and public understanding. Osmanagic weaponized the internet, flooding social media with slickly edited videos and experts from fringe fields. He framed criticism as elitist suppression, painting himself as a rebel uncovering hidden truths, and it worked because people want to believe in lost civilizations. The pyramids became a blank screen for conspiracy theories, New Age spirituality, and nationalist pride, their reality irrelevant next to their symbolic power. Today, the site still draws believers despite UNESCO and every major archaeological body dismissing it. The real lesson isn't about geology, it's about how easily facts can be outsold by spectacle when the story is seductive enough. The Bosnian pyramids weren't buried by time. They were constructed brick by brick from our willingness to trade truth for wonder, and that's a foundation no amount of digging will ever break. Rising from a rural Georgia field in 1980, the Georgia Guidestones looked like something out of a dystopian sci-fi film, a towering granite monolith etched with cryptic commandments in 8 modern languages, topped with a celestial navigation system. Dubbed America's Stonehenge, the 19-foot-tall slabs became a magnet for conspiracy theories. Were they instructions for rebuilding civilization after an apocalypse? A blueprint for a sinister new world order, the truth was far less theatrical but no less fascinating. The monument's origins trace back to a pseudonymous donor going by R.C. Christian, who commissioned the stones as a thought experiment in libertarian ideals. The 10 engraved principles, ranging from pragmatic advice like maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, to vague platitudes like avoid petty laws and useless officials, reflected Cold War-era anxieties about overpopulation and government overreach. Architects designed it with precise astronomical alignments, a nod to ancient megaliths, but this wasn't some rediscovered relic. It was a modern art project with a philosophical agenda, bankrolled by a reclusive admirer of Enlightenment thinkers like Thomas Paine. Yet the guidestones' ambiguity made them ripe for misinterpretation. Survivalists latched onto the population control line, interpreting it as a genocidal plot. Christian extremists decried the multilingual inscriptions as evidence of a one-world religion. Even the choice of languages Hebrew, Hindi, and Swahili alongside English and Russian fed theories about secret societies handpicking future dominant cultures. The stone's remote location and the donor's refusal to reveal his identity only deepened the mystique, turning a libertarian manifesto into a Rorschach test for paranoia. Then, in 2022, an explosion ripped through the site. The guidestones were demolished by unknown vandals, just months after a local official had called for their removal, citing satanic influences. The sabotage didn't silence the theories, it amplified them. Some cheered the destruction as a strike against elitism, while others saw it as proof the powers that be were erasing evidence. The real irony, the monument's core message, "Be not a cancer on the earth," had warned against exactly the kind of ideological extremism that led to its downfall. What makes the Georgia Guidestones unique among hoaxes is that they weren't a deception at all. No one claimed they were ancient. No forger profited from their sale. They were always meant to provoke discussion, just not the kind they got. Unlike the Piltdown Man or Cardiff Giant, the Guidestones' power came not from fakery but from projection. They revealed how easily a neutral object can become a canvas for our deepest fears when the right or wrong people choose to interpret it. Today, the rubble remains a pilgrimage site for conspiracy theorists, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most enduring mysteries aren't buried in the past. They're built right in front of us, waiting for someone to read between the lines. High on the walls of Egypt's Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a peculiar carving has sparked feverish debate among fringe theorists. At first glance, it does look uncannily modern, a bulbous shape resting on a stand with a serpentine filament coiled inside, connected by cables to what appears to be a battery. To believers in ancient astronaut theories, this so-called Dendera light is undeniable proof that Egyptians harnessed electricity thousands of years before its official discovery. But the truth lies not in forgotten technology, but in the rich symbolism of Egyptian mythology and the human tendency to see what we want to see in the shadows of the past. The carving is part of a larger tableau depicting the creation myth of the sun god Ra. The bulb is actually a lotus flower, a sacred symbol of rebirth, cradling the snake deity Harsomptus, who represents the dawn light emerging from primordial darkness. The filament isn't a tungsten coil, it's the serpent's body, a visual metaphor for divine energy. The cables are stylized lotus stems, linking the scene to other gods in the temple's cosmology. Even the battery has a straightforward explanation. It's the Jed pillar, an emblem of stability tied to Osiris, god of the afterlife. Every element fits neatly into Egypt's iconographic language if you know how to read it. So why the persistent lightbulb myth? Part of it stems from a classic case of pareidolia, the same psychological quirk that makes us see faces in clouds. When 20th century writers like Erich von Däniken popularized the theory, They cherry-picked the carving's most tech-like details while ignoring the surrounding context. The temple's entire ceiling is a star map and cosmic narrative filled with similar stylized imagery. No hieroglyphs mention lighting devices and no archaeological evidence. No wires, no glass fragments, no power sources supports the electricity claim. Even the supposed experimental recreations of the light bulb rely on modern materials Egyptians never possessed, but the hoax's staying power reveals something deeper. The Dendera light thrives because it flatters a modern bias, the assumption that ancient people couldn't possibly have created sophisticated art without our technology. It reduces a complex spiritual tradition to a crude, ancient aliens punchline, ignoring the real marvel, how Egyptians used symbolism to grapple with existential questions. The temple's carvings aren't blueprints for gadgets. They're a meditation on cycles of life, death, and renewal, rendered with a precision that needs no imaginary light bulbs to be impressive. Today, you can still visit Dendera and stare up at the carving. Some tourists see proof of lost science, but look closer, past the wishful thinking, and you'll find something far more extraordinary. The luminous imagination of a civilization that painted its dreams in stone, leaving behind not crude technology but timeless poetry. And sometimes the most electrifying discoveries aren't about what ancient people knew, but how they saw the world in ways we're still learning to understand. Deep in the jungles of Bolivia, a farmer allegedly stumbled upon one of archaeology's most puzzling artifacts, the Fuente Magna bowl. This heavy stone vessel, covered in intricate carvings, seemed to defy all logic. On one side, it bore cuneiform script from ancient Mesopotamia. On the other, symbols resembling Proto-Sumerian writing. If genuine, it would suggest transoceanic contact between South America and the Middle East thousands of years before Columbus. But when researchers took a closer look, the cracks in this earth-shattering narrative began to show. The bowl's cuneiform turned out to be a clumsy imitation, mixing symbols from different eras and regions in ways no ancient scribe would have used. The Proto-Sumerian side was even more suspicious, with characters cobbled together from unrelated scripts. Then there was the bowl itself. Its material didn't match known Bolivian stonework, and the carvings showed telltale signs of modern tools. Most damningly, the artifact had no documented excavation context. It simply appeared fully formed in the hands of a collector who refused to disclose its origins. Experts now agree the Fuente Magna bowl was likely crafted in the 20th century, perhaps as a tourist trinket, then artificially aged to create controversy. Meanwhile, in Ecuador, an Italian priest named Father Carlos Crespi amassed a staggering collection of over 70,000 ancient artifacts. The Crespi collection included everything from golden plaques with Phoenician inscriptions to metallic books allegedly containing lost Atlantean wisdom. These objects, supposedly gifted to Crespi by indigenous locals, were touted as proof of advanced pre-Columbian civilizations or even extraterrestrial visitors. But as with the Fuente Magna bowl, the truth was far less glamorous. Many pieces in the Crespi collection were outright forgeries, crafted by modern artisans to cash in on the priest's credulity. The ancient metallurgy often used industrial alloys impossible in pre-Hispanic America. The mysterious scripts were gibberish, borrowing random elements from Egyptian hieroglyphs to Norse runes. Even Crespi himself seemed conflicted, privately admitting some items were likely fake but displaying them anyway, perhaps believing their spiritual value outweighed their authenticity. After his death, much of the collection was lost in a fire, leaving behind only photographs and lingering questions. What ties these hoaxes together isn't just their South American setting, it's their exploitation of the continent's rich, often misunderstood indigenous history. Both the Fuente Magna bowl and the Crespi collection preyed on the romantic idea of out-of-place artifacts, objects so anachronistic they challenge mainstream archaeology. But in reality, they reveal more about modern desires than ancient secrets. The bowls fabricated cuneiform catered to diffusionist theories, insisting all advanced cultures must have stemmed from the Middle East. Crespi's metallic books fed fantasies of Atlantis or alien mentors. Both hoaxes, in their own ways, subtly diminished the real achievements of pre-Columbian societies by implying they needed outside influence to thrive. Today, the Fuente Magna bowl sits in a small Bolivian museum, its labels carefully noting its disputed origins. The Crespi collection's surviving fragments are scattered, their legends outlasting their debunking. They stand as reminders that when it comes to the past, the most seductive artifacts aren't always the ones that tell the truth, but the ones that tell the story we wish were true. And sometimes the line between archaeology and myth isn't carved in stone. It's written in the margins where our curiosity meets our capacity for self-deception. In the rolling hills of southern Illinois, a local man named Russell Burroughs made an extraordinary claim in the 1980s. He discovered a hidden cave packed with thousands of ancient artifacts, including swords, coins, and carved stones inscribed with what appeared to be Roman, Egyptian, and even Libyan script. The so-called Burroughs Cave collection was touted as revolutionary proof of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact, suggesting Mediterranean civilizations had reached America centuries before Columbus. Collectors scrambled to buy the relics, and conspiracy theorists heralded it as evidence of a suppressed history. But the deeper experts dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't archaeology. It was a carefully crafted scam preying on Midwestern lore and the hunger for lost secrets. The artifacts themselves were a chaotic hodgepodge of styles and cultures. A single ancient stone might feature garbled hieroglyphs alongside crude Roman lettering, as if someone had cut and pasted from a child's encyclopedia of ancient civilizations. The coins bore mismatched designs. Some resembled Roman denarii, others looked like cartoonish imitations of Phoenician currency. Even the cave's location shifted in Burroughs' retellings, its entrance mysteriously collapsing or flooding whenever outsiders requested access. Despite these glaring inconsistencies, buyers lined up, lured by the romantic idea that their backyard could hold world-changing secrets. What made the hoax so effective was its exploitation of local legends. Southern Illinois already had a rich tradition of mound builder myth stories about a mysterious ancient race, thought to have constructed the region's pre-Columbian earthworks. Burroughs leaned into these tales, framing his cave as the missing link between these mounds and old-world civilizations. He even claimed the artifacts were tied to a lost tribe of Welsh explorers, tapping into popular theories about pre-Viking European contact. The result was a perfect storm of regional pride and wishful thinking, where skepticism was dismissed as academic elitism. The scheme unraveled when independent researchers examined the artifacts. The ancient inscriptions included modern Arabic numerals and grammatical errors no historical scribe would have made. The stone carvings showed fresh tool marks under magnification, and the metal objects lacked the patina of centuries underground. Most damningly, several pieces were traced to mass-produced souvenirs sold at tourist shops near the Great Pyramids. Burroughs, faced with mounting evidence, became increasingly erratic, at one point claiming the CIA had raided his cave to suppress the truth. Yet the myth refused to die. Even after Burroughs' death in 2021, believers insisted the cave was real, its treasures hidden by shadowy forces. The hoax's longevity reveals something unsettling about how we engage with history. Burroughs didn't just sell fake artifacts, he sold a narrative, one where ordinary people could defy stuffy institutions and uncover earth-shattering truths. That fantasy, it turns out, is far harder to debunk than a few poorly carved stones. Today, the Burroughs Cave relics circulate in private collections, a cautionary tale about the price we pay when legend outweighs evidence, and how easily the past can be rewritten by those who know which stories we're desperate to hear. In 1924, construction workers near Tucson, Arizona, unearthed a series of bizarre lead artifacts, swords, crosses, and crosses embedded with Latin and Hebrew inscriptions. But these weren't just random relics. The markings told a wild story. Medieval Jewish explorers had supposedly crossed the Atlantic in the 8th century, fought battles with local tribes, and left behind these artifacts as proof of their presence. The so-called Tucson artifacts became a sensation, with newspapers declaring them the most important archaeological find in American history. There was just one glaring problem. The Latin was riddled with modern phrases, the Hebrew was misspelled, and the lead freshly cast with no signs of centuries underground. The inscriptions were a linguistic train wreck. One cross bore the phrase Kalalis, the unknown land, a label no medieval traveler would have used. Another featured the name Toltezus, a bizarre mashup of Toltec and Latin that sounded more like a bad fantasy novel than a historical record. Even the dates were off. Some artifacts referenced events centuries apart as if their makers had no grasp of time. Yet despite these red flags, the Tucson artifacts found eager believers. At a time when Americans were fascinated by theories of pre-Columbian contact, the idea of medieval Jews in Arizona was irresistible. Local boosters saw tourism gold. Religious groups latched onto the supposed proof of ancient Hebrew influence, and for a brief moment, Tucson became the center of an archaeological frenzy. The hoax unraveled thanks to a sharp-eyed geologist named Neil Judd. He noted the lead showed no weathering, and the inscriptions had crisp, modern tool marks. Then came the clincher. A local fraternal group called the Ancient Order of Foresters admitted the artifacts were part of an elaborate initiation ritual. Members had crafted them as a prank, never expecting the joke to spiral into national headlines. But the deeper story here isn't just about a fraternity's gag gone wrong. The Tucson artifacts reveal how easily pseudo-history can take root when it flatters our biases. For some, the artifacts proved America's biblical connections, feeding into narratives of divine destiny. For others, they offered a counterpoint to Eurocentric history, suggesting a more diverse pre-Columbian world. And that's the insidious power of such hoaxes. They don't just deceive. They give us permission to believe the stories we want to be true, even when the evidence screams otherwise. Today, the Tucson artifacts gather dust in an Arizona museum, their labels acknowledging their true origin, not as relics of a lost civilization, but as relics of human gullibility. And perhaps that's the real lesson they leave behind, not about who walked the desert centuries ago, but about who's walking them now, still searching for validation in the dirt. High in the mountains of China near the Tibetan border, a 1938 expedition led by archaeologist Kai Pu-te allegedly stumbled upon a cave filled with ancient graves and hundreds of stone discs, each about a foot wide with a hole in the center and covered in tiny spiral grooves that some claimed were alien hieroglyphs. The sensational story of the Dropa stones was born. According to the tale later circulated in fringe circles, these discs recorded the tragic saga of an extraterrestrial race called the Dropa who crash-landed on Earth 12,000 years ago, their spacecraft stranded in the remote Bayan Kararula Mountains. But when researchers went looking for proof, they found not evidence of ancient astronauts, but a trail of deception leading back to a Russian science fiction magazine. The first red flag: the original expedition never happened. No records exist of Kai Pu-te or his team in Chinese archaeological archives. The story only surfaced in 1962 when a Soviet writer named Vyacheslav Zaitsev published an article in Sputnik magazine, a popular science fiction periodical. Zaitsev described the discs in vivid detail, claiming they contained cobalt and spun at high voltages, details tailor-made to sound like alien technology. He even included a melodramatic translation of the inscriptions, describing the Dropa's despair at being trapped on Earth. The tale spread like wildfire among UFO enthusiasts despite one glaring omission. Zaitsev provided no photographs, no museum catalog numbers, no verifiable way to track down the supposedly revolutionary artifacts. By the 1970s, investigators exposed the hoax's paper-thin foundations. The disc's ancient spiral grooves, when examined in blurry circulated photos, were identical to by disc's common ceremonial jade objects from China's Neolithic period. The hieroglyphs were nothing more than natural striations in the stone or crude modern etchings. Most damningly, linguists pointed out that the Dropa language resembled no known writing system, ancient or alien. It was a haphazard collection of dots and lines that bore an uncanny resemblance to doodles in Zaitsev's original article. What makes the Dropa stones uniquely frustrating isn't just the fabrication, but how it twisted real archaeology. The Bayan Karaula region does have ancient burial sites, and by discs are legitimate artifacts, but the alien narrative overshadowed genuine cultural history. The hoax thrived because it tapped into Cold War-era fascination with both extraterrestrials and the mystical East, blending exoticism and pseudoscience into a package Western audiences craved. Even today, despite Chinese authorities confirming no such discs exist in their collections, the legend persists in conspiracy circles. The Dropa stones reveal a pattern seen in many archaeological hoaxes, the blurring of fiction and fact until the lie becomes more seductive than the truth. They remind us that sometimes the most alien thing about these stories isn't their content, it's how willingly we suspend disbelief when the tale promises to rewrite history. And in that sense, the real artifact here isn't a stone disc at all, but the human imagination itself, forever carving new mysteries where none exist. In the mid-19th century, Michigan's Upper Peninsula became the backdrop for one of archaeology's most brazen regional conspiracies, a series of carefully planted copper artifacts designed to rewrite the area's prehistoric significance. Prospectors and amateur historians began discovering an avalanche of copper tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects, all supposedly crafted by an ancient, technologically advanced culture that had mined the region's rich copper deposits thousands of years before European contact. The artifacts were uncannily sophisticated axes with perfectly balanced proportions, spear points with razor-sharp edges, even intricate decorative items that seemed to rival old-world metallurgy. Newspapers declared Michigan the cradle of a forgotten civilization, and local boosters saw dollar signs in the tourism potential. There was just one problem. Nearly every one of these relics was a modern fake, hammered out not by ancient hands but by 19th century blacksmiths hungry for glory. The scheme's origins trace back to the copper rush of the 1840s, when Michigan's mines were producing more of the metal than anywhere else on Earth. As competition grew, so did the desire to position the region as historically significant, not just a source of raw ore, but the heart of a legendary copper culture. Enter a network of landowners, collectors, and amateur archaeologists who began finding artifacts in suspiciously convenient locations. Some were crude imitations, like the so-called copper scrolls that bore markings resembling no known indigenous script. Others were shockingly detailed, like the astronomical tablets, etched with celestial maps that suspiciously matched 19th century star charts. The most audacious creations even mimicked the patina of age, treated with chemicals to mimic centuries of oxidation. Those sharp-eyed metallurgists later noted the corrosion patterns were all wrong for long-term burial. What made the hoax so effective was its timing. This was the era of the mound builder myth, when white Americans were obsessed with the idea that an advanced, lost race, not Native Americans, had built the continent's ancient earthworks. Michigan's copper forgeries tapped into that narrative perfectly, offering proof of a sophisticated pre-colonial industry. Never mind that actual indigenous copper use in the region was well documented, with native communities like the Ojibwe crafting utilitarian tools and trade goods. The fake relics were sexier. They hinted at a grander, more mysterious past, one that conveniently ignored living indigenous traditions in favor of speculative fantasies. The ruse began to crumble when professional archaeologists like Henry Gilman pointed out glaring inconsistencies. Many artifacts used alloys unseen in pre-contact metallurgy. Others bore tool marks from modern equipment like industrial-grade punches. Most damningly, the distribution of finds defied logic. They clustered near newly built roads and railroad lines, not in undisturbed archaeological context. By the 1890s, the jig was up, though the hoax's legacy lingered in museum basements and private collections. Yet the Michigan copper hoaxes reveal more than just 19th-century gullibility. They're a case study in how economic ambition can distort history. The forgers weren't just pranksters, they were crafting a marketable identity for a region desperate to stand out. And the public's eagerness to believe, that speaks to a deeper truth. We're often more captivated by the past we imagine than the one that actually existed. Today, these fakes serve as a warning, not just about forgery, but about the stories we're willing to buy when they shine as brightly as polished copper. In 1981, the Japanese archaeological world was rocked by a scandal that exposed not just a hoax, but an entire fabricated history. Shozo Sato, a wealthy collector and self-proclaimed expert, had spent years amassing what he called the Sato collection, an astonishing array of stone tools, carvings, and even clay tablets he claimed were relics of a previously unknown prehistoric Japanese civilization. Museums displayed his finds. Scholars wrote papers analyzing the ancient symbols. There was just one problem. Every single artifact had been carved in Sato's own workshop by modern artisans, then artificially aged to fool the experts. The artifacts were almost too perfect. Intricate stone figurines depicted human-animal hybrids unlike anything found in legitimate Japanese dig sites. Clay tablets bore mysterious markings Sato insisted were a lost writing system, though they resembled no known ancient script. The tools showed suspiciously uniform wear patterns, as if someone had meticulously sanded them rather than used them over generations. Yet for years, academics accepted them at face value, swayed by Sato's charisma and the sheer volume of his collection. He'd even published lavish catalogues documenting his discoveries, lending them an air of scholarly legitimacy. The scheme unraveled when a geologist noticed something odd about the stones. Under magnification, the weathering matched the effects of modern grinding tools, not centuries of exposure. Then came the smoking gun. An artisan who'd worked in Sato's workshop came forward, revealing they'd been paid to carve the artifacts using ordinary chisels before staining them with tea and dirt to mimic age. The most damning detail, some of the ancient designs were lifted straight from 20th century manga comics, their modern origins hidden under a veneer of faux primitivism. What makes the Sato collection uniquely troubling isn't just the scale of the deception, but what it says about the hunger for national identity. Japan's post-war era saw intense interest in proving the island's cultural antiquity, a reaction to Western influence. Sato preyed on that desire, fabricating a past that felt grander and more mysterious than the archaeological record supported. His forgeries weren't just objects, they were wish fulfillment, a manufactured connection to a deeper heritage. And they worked because people wanted them to be real. Even after exposure, some fringe groups clung to the collection's authenticity, accusing skeptics of elitism. Today, the Sato artifacts linger in storage, a cautionary tale about how easily nationalism and nostalgia can override skepticism, the most revealing part. The hoax didn't just fool experts, it gave them exactly what they'd been hoping to find. And that's the danger of letting the stories we crave dictate the truths we accept. Sometimes the past isn't buried in the ground, it's assembled in a workshop waiting for someone to believe in it. Deep in a well being dug in Nampa, Idaho in 1889, workers made a bizarre claim. they'd pulled up a tiny clay figurine from over 300 feet underground, buried in layers of sediment dating back millions of years. The so-called Nampa image, a crude but unmistakably human-shaped figurine, sent shockwaves through the scientific community. If genuine, it would upend everything we knew about human history, suggesting modern humans existed far earlier than any evidence supported. Newspapers splashed the story, scholars debated its implications, but the closer experts looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't an ancient artifact. It was a geological fluke, or worse, a hoax disguised as one. The figurine's discovery raised immediate red flags. The well-digging process involved a sand pump which churned up material from different depths and mixed it together. There was no way to verify exactly where the artifact originated, let alone confirm it hadn't slipped in from higher, more recent layers. Then there was the figurine itself. While weathered, its detailing was suspiciously crisp for something supposedly millions of years old. The proportions, a rounded head, stubby limbs, looked more like a child's doll than a prehistoric ritual object. And the material, local clay, identical to what modern potters in the area used. The most damning clue came from the excavation's timing. The late 19th century was the height of the Great Hoax era, when fake antiquities from the Cardiff Giant to the Michigan Relics were flooding the market. Nampa was a railroad town swelling with newcomers eager for attention. The figurine's discoverers stood to gain fame, if not profit, from the buzz. Even the Smithsonian, initially intrigued, later dismissed it as likely modern, noting the complete absence of similar finds in the region's legitimate archaeology. Yet the Nampa image myth persisted, thanks to its appeal to fringe theorists. For creationists, it disproved evolution, offering proof that humans coexisted with dinosaurs. For proponents of lost civilizations, it hinted at advanced cultures buried by time. The figurine became a Rorschach test, reflecting whatever narrative its believers wanted to see. What makes this hoax unique is how little effort went into the deception. Unlike the Piltdown Man's elaborate filing or the Ica stone's intricate carvings, the Nampa image was crude, almost lazy in its execution. It didn't need to be convincing, just mysterious enough to exploit the era's hunger for paradigm-shattering discoveries. Today, the figurine sits in an Idaho museum, labeled as a curiosity rather than a relic. Its real legacy isn't in rewriting history, but in reminding us how easily a single unverified object can become a vessel for our wildest fantasies, especially when we're desperate to believe. In 1936, a couple hiking along the banks of Texas's Red Creek made a discovery that would baffle scientists for decades: a weathered wooden hammer. Its metal head fused perfectly into a solid block of ancient-looking rock. Dubbed the London Hammer after the nearby town, the artifact appeared impossibly out of place. The rock surrounding it was dated to the Cretaceous period, over 100 million years old. If genuine, the hammer would rewrite human history, suggesting advanced toolmakers existed alongside dinosaurs. But geology, as it often does, had other explanations. The hammer's ancient encasement wasn't a time capsule. It was a textbook example of a concretion, a natural process where minerals cement around an object over time. Concretions can form startlingly fast, especially in environments rich in dissolved minerals like iron or calcium. The hammer likely fell into a creek bed where mineral-rich water seeped into its porous wood and metal, gradually encasing it in a rock-like shell within decades, not millennia. The real giveaway, the hammer's design. Its octagonal head and beveled edges matched 19th-century American blacksmithing techniques perfectly, hardly the work of Cretaceous-era craftsmen. Yet the hoax's allure wasn't just about mistaken geology. The London Hammer tapped into a persistent mythos, the idea of out-of-place artifacts, objects that defy conventional timelines. For creationists, it became proof of a young Earth, while fringe theorists spun tales of time travelers or lost civilizations. Even the hammer's impossible preservation played into these fantasies, never mind that concretions regularly preserve far more delicate objects, from fossilized clams to Civil War bullets, in eerily pristine condition. What makes this hoax fascinating isn't the deception itself. The hammer's owners never claimed it was ancient, but how it was weaponized by others to challenge mainstream science. The artifact's rise to fame came decades after its discovery, when it was cherry-picked by anti-evolution groups as evidence against established geology. Labs refusing to disclose full testing methods added to the mystique, allowing conspiracy theories to flourish. Today, the hammer sits in a Texas museum, its label acknowledging both its likely 19th century origin and its accidental geological makeover. It's a reminder that nature's artistry can mimic mystery, and that sometimes the most ordinary objects become extraordinary simply because we want them to be. After all, a hammer is just a hammer until someone decides it's a relic of a world that never existed. Every archaeological hoax tells two stories, the one it fabricates about the past and the one it reveals about its creators. Scratch the surface of these deceptions, and you'll find a tangled web of motives as old as civilization itself. Greed, perhaps the most straightforward driver, lurks behind cases like Israel Rauchamovsky's golden tiara or the Persian princess mummy. Forgers aren't just crafting artifacts, they're minting currency from humanity's thirst for the extraordinary. But money alone doesn't explain why so many hoaxes flourish long after their creators could have cashed out. The truth is messier, rooted in our collective psyche. Nationalism fuels some of the most enduring frauds. Take the Piltdown Man, born from Britain's desperation to claim a piece of human origins, or Shinichi Fujimura's buried tools, designed to extend Japan's historical narrative. These weren't mere pranks, they were patriotic acts weaponizing the past to serve present-day pride. Even the Kensington runestone, despite its laughable runes, became a Scandinavian-American cultural emblem, proof that immigrants could stake their own claim to American history. The artifacts themselves hardly matter, it's the identity they symbolize that gives them power. Then there's the intoxicating lure of recognition. Charles Dawson, the amateur behind Piltdown, craved scientific validation. George Hull, mastermind of the Cardiff Giant, reveled in the chaos he'd unleashed. These weren't just con artists, they were performers, staging grand spectacles where they played the role of discoverer. The hoax becomes a magic trick where the real trick isn't fooling experts, but convincing the world to suspend disbelief long enough for the creator to bask in the spotlight. Ideology twists archaeology into propaganda. The Wallam Olam manuscript wasn't just bad linguistics, it was colonial erasure disguised as scholarship. The Michigan Relics and Newark Holy Stones catered to religious agendas, rewriting Native American history to fit biblical frameworks. And let's not forget how figures like Erich von Däniken hijacked the Ica stones, morphing a farmer's folk art into evidence for pseudoscientific theories. When artifacts become rhetorical tools, truth is the first casualty. Spotting these frauds often comes down to pattern recognition. Anachronisms are the most glaring red flags. The Michigan tablets horse-drawn plows, the Acambaro figures cartoonish dinosaurs. Then there's the uncanny valley of preservation. The Piltdown jaws suspiciously unstained break lines, the Shroud of Turin's improbably crisp bloodstains. Real archaeology is messy, fragmented, incomplete. Fakes, by contrast, tend to be too neat, too convenient, as if the past is bending over backward to answer modern questions. The cruelest irony, many hoaxes overshadow genuine discoveries. While museums displayed the Cardiff Giant, real indigenous earthworks crumbled unnoticed. As scholars debated the Vinland map, actual Viking sites in Newfoundland waited to be excavated. The biggest casualty isn't our trust in experts, it's the authentic history these frauds drown out. Yet perhaps that's the ultimate lesson. In our rush to marvel at the extraordinary, we risk missing the ordinary, fragile truths buried right beneath our feet. The digital age hasn't just changed how we communicate, it's rewritten the rules of deception. Where forgers once relied on chisels and acid washes, today's hoaxers wield algorithms and neural networks, crafting fake artifacts so convincing they bypass the naked eye and target the very tools designed to catch them. Take the case of the Nefertiti deepfake, a supposedly lost Egyptian bust that surfaced in a private auction catalog 2 years ago. The artifact bore the Queen's iconic likeness, complete with weathered limestone textures and museum-grade provenance documents. But when experts ran the statue through a spectral imaging scanner, they hit a glitch. The scan revealed subtle pixel distortions around the headdress, a telltale sign of a 3D model spliced onto a genuine ancient base. The bust, a digital Frankenstein stitched together from museum scans of other relics and aged with AI-trained texture algorithms. This isn't isolated. Last year, a blockchain startup claimed to authenticate a forged Ming Dynasty vase using an AI that analyzed glaze patterns. The algorithm, trained on thousands of auction house images, gave the vase a 97% genuine rating until conservators noticed the floral motifs included a tulip, a flower unknown in China until the 17th century. The AI had been fed manipulated data, learning to recognize artificially aged fakes as real. It's a sinister twist. The very technology meant to protect against fraud is being weaponized to endorse it. Deepfakes aren't limited to images. Audio forgeries are muddying historical archives. In 2021, a collector discovered a vinyl recording of Abraham Lincoln's voice, allegedly preserved on an Edison-era phonograph cylinder. The recording, which featured a raspy voice reciting the Gettysburg Address, went viral before audio physicists dissected it. The spectral analysis showed frequency patterns impossible for 19th-century recording tech, and the dialect, once run through linguistic AI, matched 21st-century voice actor databases. The culprit, a hobbyist who'd trained a voice synthesis model on Lincoln's documented speeches and layered it with period-appropriate static. What makes these digital hoaxes so insidious is their scalability. A single convincing AI model can churn out endless artifacts, flooding markets and forums with plausible fakes. In 2023, researchers at Oxford exposed a network selling AI-generated Dead Sea Scrolls fragments, each with unique Hebrew lettering tailored to evade plagiarism checks. The fragments were priced modestly, just enough to avoid scrutiny, but collectively netted millions. Unlike traditional forgers, these operations don't need master craftsmen. They need coders tweaking variables in a neural network. Yet the most alarming trend isn't the forgeries themselves, it's how they exploit our trust in technology. We've been conditioned to believe machines are impartial, that algorithms don't lie. But AI is only as honest as the data it's fed, and digital hoaxes are increasingly poisoning those wells. Last month, a German museum had to pull a rediscovered Van Gogh sketch after realizing its authentication software had been trained on a dataset contaminated with known fakes. The AI wasn't verifying art, it was replicating past mistakes at hyperspeed. The arms race between forgers and authenticators has entered uncharted territory. Universities are now developing forensic AIs designed to detect other AIs, scanning for the uncanny valleys in texture, shadow, or brushstroke that betray synthetic origins. But as one cryptographer noted, it's like trying to outrun a shadow. Every improvement in detection sparks a counter-improvement in deception. The future of archaeological fraud might not lie in fooling humans at all, but in tricking the machines we've trusted to replace our own fallible judgment. And that's the real artifact of the digital age, not the fakes we can spot, but the ones we've taught ourselves not to see. What these hoaxes reveal isn't just human ingenuity, it's the invisible framework of biases shaping how we see the past. Archaeology, for all its scientific rigor, isn't immune to the gravitational pull of cultural narratives. The Piltdown Man thrived because Britain wanted a missing link on its soil. The Michigan relics flourished because settlers craved a biblical connection to their new home. Even today, with carbon dating and spectral imaging at our fingertips, we're still vulnerable to the stories we want to believe. That's the real artifact these frauds leave behind, not forged bones or fake scripts, but a mirror held up to our own blind spots. Consider how quickly fringe theories latch onto anomalies: the Ica stone's cartoonish dinosaurs, the Dendera light's bulb. We project modernity onto the past, mistaking symbolism for lost technology, artistry for alien intervention. It's not just ignorance at play, it's a discomfort with the idea that ancient people might have been brilliant in ways we don't immediately recognize. A hieroglyph isn't a wiring diagram. A myth isn't a spaceship manual, yet the allure persists because rewriting history is easier than sitting with its complexities. But here's the twist: hoaxes don't just exploit our biases, they expose them. Every time a forgery collapses under scrutiny, it forces us to confront the systems that let it thrive. The Fujimura scandal didn't just discredit a few stones, it revealed how academic pressure can warp peer review. The Vinland map's demise showed how nationalism can override evidence. These aren't failures of science, they're failures of the human ego tangled up in science's cloak. So where does that leave us? Not in cynicism, but in curiosity, the kind that asks harder questions. The next time you see a headline claiming a game-changing discovery, pause. Who benefits from this narrative? What gaps does it claim to fill? And most crucially, whose voices are erased in the telling? Real archaeology isn't about grand reveals. It's the slow, unglamorous work of context: pottery shards, soil layers, the quiet accumulation of evidence that rarely fits into a viral story. That's why debunking hoaxes matters. It's not just about fact-checking, it's about reclaiming wonder from deception. The past is strange enough without invented ghosts. The real mysteries: how Çatalhöyük's residents lived without streets, how Polynesians navigated by starlight, don't need aliens or Atlantis to be breathtaking. They just need us to listen, so keep questioning, keep marveling, and the next time someone tries to sell you a crystal skull or a Viking Midwest, ask the simplest question of all. What's the richer story here, the one they're selling or the one we're missing? Now it's your turn. Drop your favorite hoax in the comments, and let's keep the conversation digging deeper. After all, history isn't set in stone. It's written by whoever's willing to look closer.